Hello vinyl community, this is Mike at TCAT's Deep Vinyl Tracks. I'm doing another one in the King Crimson series today. This is video number 4. And as you remember, the previous video, they released Lizard, moved to more of a jazzy progressive feel, and unfortunately, the lead singer was not that great of a lead singer and kind of ended up messing up the first side of that album. And even before they could go on tour to support that album, the lead singer Haskell and the drummer McCulloch both left the band, and so they had to delay any live shows. So Fripp, in the meantime, was starting to get a little frustrated with the whole thing, and kind of gave up on the band, which left Mel Collins to try to reform the band on his own. So he went out there and started looking for new singers, and another surprise, one of the singers that he passed on, well, I don't know if he passed on him or if some other reasons it didn't happen, but it was Bryan Ferry, who of course is the lead singer for Roxy Music. But he was one of the options that they had to replace him. Anyway, Andy McCulloch, who was the previous drummer and left, he had a roommate by the name of Ian Wallace, and Ian Wallace ended up taking Andy McCulloch's place, and this revitalized Robert Fripp's interest in the band again. He started to get excited about it. Andy McCulloch, if you didn't know, would go on to become one of Don Henley's backup drummers. So Fripp is re-energized now, and he ended up helping them to recruit a singer and a bassist. So John Wetton was also invited on as the bassist, but he was working with another band at the time and declined for the time being. Most everybody knows that he would join later. Boz Burrell was hired as a vocalist. Now, fairly unknown person, but he did have some acoustic guitar experience, and since they were looking for a bassist, Robert Fripp taught him how to play the bass. Now, Burrell had also had experience on the guitar, acoustic guitar, like I said, and so he taught him the bass based on that, and he picked it up quite quickly. So with this new lineup, they could finally go on tour. However, a lot of different musical differences and everybody else's drug-fueled lifestyles left Robert Fripp kind of off on his own, and he distanced himself from the band, yet they still managed to put out their next album. So coming out a year later after Lizard, in December of 1971, they released the album Islands. Sorry about the glare. I'll take it out, but it still has shrink on it anyway. This is the 200-gram remastered version of the album. There's the back side of it. Now, there were 2 different covers. There's this one, and there's one that was designed by Peter Sinfield. This particular issue has a reproduction of the Sinfield cover for Islands. Kind of a sparse front and back cover. This particular one has the lyrics on the inside. So this album kind of stays along the same lines as more of a jazz-influenced album. The influences coming again from Miles Davis and also from Amin Jamal. They kind of used their inspiration for jazz from these musicians. The lyrical inspiration from this album comes from Homer's Odyssey. And like I said, they decided on this album to move to a more softer approach than they had in the past. So yes, it is a little bit softer, but to me, this is one of my favorite King Crimson albums. I think it's quite overlooked. People tend to bypass it for some reason, and I don't know why. I find it's one of their better albums, quite personally, and Boz Burrell is actually a good lead singer. So this album reached number 30 in the UK and number 76 in the United States. The lineup consisted of Robert Fripp on guitar, mellotron, and harmonium. Peter Sinfield again is coming back as the lyricist, and also aided in design, as you've seen one of the covers, and also in production. Mel Collins on sax, flutes, and backing vocals, so he's back again. Ian Wallace, the new drummer, drums, percussion, and backing vocals, and Boz Burrell, the new lead vocalist and bassist. The session musicians this time around would include Paulina Lucas, who is the soprano voice on the first track. Keith Tippett again returns on piano, brings his jazz piano influences in on this album again. Robert Miller once again on oboe, Mark Schirig on cornet, Harry Miller on double bass, Wilf Gibson on violin, and he's also the string leader, called the string leader, for their uncredited orchestra, which provides all the strings. This album is divided up into 6 tracks. Again, like I said, it's more of a softer approach, but still using that same jazz inspiration from those people that I mentioned earlier. The first track on the album is called Formentera Lady at 10 minutes and 18 seconds. This particular track has a nice folkish sound to it, but also a lot of jazz influence. Has a strong orchestral feel to it, with a quiet combination of cello, flute, and piano, and very pensive vocals. The beginning introduction with the instrumental part goes on for about 3 minutes before coming into a soft rhythm and vocal melody for the chorus. The sax comes in about halfway through as it slowly builds using jazz improvisation while a theme develops. Soon a soprano comes in, giving it a very expansive sound, and this long track, very nice track, eventually continues into track number 2.
Down a crumpled, sun-baked, stony road, dusty wheels leaning, rusting in the sun, snuff-brown walls where Spanish lizards run. Here I'm shadowed by a dragon fig tree's fan, ringed by ants and musing over man.
Which is Sailor's Tale. Now, Sailor's Tale is is actually an instrumental, and it's kind of an extension of the theme that was developed in Formentera Lady. This one moves to a more frantic beat, and the strings start to develop a theme, and which was hinted around in the previous track. This instrumental moves to some cool squeaky sax and builds until a mellotron comes in, making it very symphonic sounding. This is more of a jazz fusion style track. Eventually it gets a bit chaotic as the guitar starts to shred into a really cool climax. Track number 3 is called The Letters, and it has a duration of 4 minutes and 28 seconds. So The Letters is the last track on the first side. It's a very progressive sounding track, and this and the following track are really great studies in extreme dynamics. As it goes from softs to louds and really sudden bursts. Boz Burrell handles the vocal dynamics very well, and the processed vocals that they use in this give it a real unsettling feel.
The wife with chokestone throat ran to the day with tear-blind
Side 2 of the album starts out with the song Ladies of the Road, 5 minutes and 33 seconds. Again, very similar to the previous track, very progressive, utilizes dynamics quite well, goes from extremely soft to extremely loud in some places. But this one seems to be a bit more unhinged than The Letters. The lyrics are also quite raunchy on this one, which is interesting for King Crimson. Track number 5 is called Prelude, Song of the Gulls. This one is 4 minutes and 14 seconds and has a very classical influence to it. It's all performed by the strings, a very kind of a small string orchestra, and is probably one of the most beautiful melodies in all of King Crimson's discography. Just absolutely beautiful. I love this track, and it really sets you up for the next track. Track number 6 is called Islands, the title track of the album, and it's 11 minutes and 50 seconds. This has another lovely melody. It starts out with vocals and piano at first, and other instruments like the oboe. Other instruments come in later as it slowly starts to build. Soon brass comes in and improvises along with the melody, or off of the melody, and about a minute of silence at the end of the track before you hear some stage chatter and some things going on. At least some editions had that on it. But Islands is one of those great tracks, very epic sounding. Again, just fits the album quite well.
Dark harbor keys like fingers of stone hungrily reach from my island, clutch sailors' words, pearls and goods are strewn on my shore, equal in love, bound in circles, earth, stream and tree return to the sea, waves sweep the sand from my island.
So I would highly recommend this album if you're not into the louder, harder stuff of King Crimson. This one, it has a more peaceful feeling, but it does tend to, go off on its tangents, and that's what makes King Crimson interesting. So anyway, shortly after this release, Robert Fripp told Peter Sinfield that he couldn't work with him anymore, and that would mark a major shift for the band. Fripp also refused to play a track that Mel Collins had written, and because of this, the band broke up, and only to be reformed almost immediately after with a new lineup, and we go into a new phase of King Crimson with the next album. But this is a great album. I don't think should be ignored, even though the next stage of King Crimson shows them at their highest peak of creativity. I find this album to be very pleasant, very nice to listen to, and a good alternative away from the usual chaotic sound of King Crimson. So if you haven't heard Islands, I suggest you take a listen to it, and thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next episode.